Reconnect with Rockers is on, and the bass legend and icon Rudy Sarzo is here. Rudy is one of my favorite people for a multitude of reasons. Of course, all of the amazing musical memories, whether it was Blizzard of Oz or Quiet Riot or White Snake or Sun King or Queensryche or now with the Guess Who. Also with his affiliation for animals, and we always start talking about animals and how much we love them and rescue and our dogs and everything. But I thought of you immediately, Rudy, when I found out that Randy was going to be part of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, class of 2021, Randy Rhoads, of course. And what was it like, and where were you when you heard about this, amazing accolade that your friend was going to be receiving?
Hey, Terry, thank you for having me on your show. And yes, to answer your question about how I felt about Randy being inducted into the Hall of Fame. First of all, I think it was a surprise to everybody. We were not expecting anything like that, and it's what a wonderful honor, so deserving for Randy. But people ask me what do I think? Well, to think about it means that I have to be analytical. So my analysis of why, how, and why, and all of that, and this is just beyond what a deserving tribute to Randy's music and his legacy and everything, and as a human being. Okay, putting that aside. Well, adding on to it, actually, I'm not putting it aside. Okay, I'll take this. That's the foundation of what I'm going to talk about. So in addition to that, okay, I think if you analyzing it, which would mean to answer your question, why do I think? Okay, this is how I see it. You have a period, let's say in the 70s, where Eddie Van Halen was the last shredder in a rock band for rock band to be signed, right? Okay, after that, in came punk and new wave. Okay, and what happened was that we, meaning Quiet Riot with the Randy Rhoads version, we were in Los Angeles during that period trying to get a record deal and develop the band and so on. And none of the bands of our of our musical style, our genre, were getting the attention from the labels because they were concentrating on punk and new wave in Los Angeles, And but it took Randy to actually leave LA, Quiet Riot, and join Ozzy in England, who already had a record deal, where the scene, the metal scene, was the new wave of British metal was buzzing, was building up. Bands like Judas Priest, bands like Iron Maiden, Def Leppard, who I actually tour with Ozzy, Motorhead. Randy was a major part. If I look at it, let's see, from that whole metal thing, Randy was the lead shredder, the lead classical influence composer, something that, him coming from a musical family, teachers. Randy was a teacher. He got all these incredible qualifications that a lot of musicians did not have growing up in a musical family, him becoming a teacher himself. So he brought a lot of that into his music. That was the essence of Randy Rhoads. So here you have Eddie Van Halen, the last of the shredders of the 70s, and here you have the first shredder of the 80s, opening up the doors for future shredders of the 80s to it's kind of like a validation to that musical genre. The guitar virtuoso. I believe he was the first new guitar virtuoso of the 80s to influence a whole new generation of guitar players. So who better than Randy Rhoads to enter the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a pioneer of that genre of music?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I went back and I reread Off the Rails, which I called it your autobiography. And you're like, no, that was my book. It was my tribute piece to Randy. I don't think that there is a better time stamp for that period of music. And you talked about ushering in that British, wave, and how everybody was saying to you, you can't be a part of this. You're Cuban. You have a Cuban accent. What are you can't be in a British metal band. What are you, crazy? So I look at that timestamp of that period, and I think, and you often have said, a lot of times kids come up to you, or people come up to you and say, can I ask you a question? And 8 times out of 10, it's going to be about Randy. And I think if people haven't read the book, I travel back into the period of time where I am in every club that you guys played, then I'm in every bigger arena that you guys played, every review that you read. I mean, it's so amazing that you were not wasted during that whole period of time of your career, because you have such a great memory of all of that. So let me ask you, did you know then how influential and instrumental that whole Blizzard of Oz as a whole, that whole touring band and that whole period of time was going to be in hard rock music?
That's a great question. And I will answer that question with the singular purpose of why I wrote the book. And the number one question I get asked as I travel around the world is, what was it like to play with Randy Rhoads? And the best way that I could, so the book is to answer that question, because I always felt every time that I tried to, let's say I'm in the lobby of the hotel on my way to sound check, and there's somebody waiting for me to sign something, especially Ozzy related with Randy. And as I'm signing, they asked me, what was it like to play with Randy Rhoads? And, everybody's waiting for me in the bus, waiting to go to sound check. So I come up with, top of my head, one story. And I tell the story really quickly, and we say goodbye and thank you for your support. And I go on to the gig, and I'm sitting there in the bus thinking, oh, I should have said this one or that story. So basically my book is it's a complete answer to that question. What was it like to play with Randy Rhoads? Now, what I really, really, really wanted to do with the reader is to take them by the hand into a time and place 40 years ago. It's a whole different world, technology-wise, music-wise, taste, or as human beings, we were very different back then. Not only at the beginning of the 80s, but actually at the end of the 70s, because the book covers Randy Rhoads with Quiet Riot, because they're connected. We're all connected with that, and that I knew about the quantum qualities of Randy's music while I was playing with him in Ozzy. No, because I couldn't. First of all, I could not. I didn't have the information that I have now, 40 years later, as a human being, that I've grown, and I have certain knowledge about things and why things and how things happen and so on, and the importance of certain things. I didn't. I was at the beginning of my journey, so it's kind of, it's, to me, the best way I can compare it is, let's say, if you were a football player, if Joe Montana got to play the Super Bowl every single day, every game was the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl becomes this is what I do. I play the Super Bowl every day. Yeah. When you're at that level with these magnificent musicians, this is what I know.
Yeah.
Now for you are in the game every single day. The difference is, for a fan, when they attend let's say in New Jersey, Meadowlands, a fan goes to Meadowlands, and every week he will come to a show. Now he's got a better perception of my Super Bowl than I do, because this is all I know. A fan will see other different games, not necessarily the Super Bowl. They might see some preseason games when they're warming up, or let's say a band that's developing and so on. So there's the fan. It's the one who can actually have a better perception of what we do in comparison to everything else that they see every single day, every single week as they attend different shows. For me, my perception, I think I was so busy touring, I didn't have time to see other shows. So all I saw was my show that just happened to have Randy Rhoads on stage with me, and of course, Tommy Aldridge, and later on, Dan Airy, and the main attraction, Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah. Yeah. And your friend, because you guys knew each other before that. Well, that brings me to another interesting point. Well, first of all, Randy's always too like almost like a mythical being, like a unicorn of rock and roll, The men loved him, the women loved him. I mean, my gosh, I don't think there was a more beautiful face and beautiful guy, so the girls loved him, the guys loved him. And he always has struck such a chord with rock fans, even beyond his talent. Why do you think that is, Rudy?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the unicorn metaphor, because I have never looked at it that way before, but I will from this moment on. So I thank you for that, because that perfectly describes Randy. I never noticed, I never looked at it that way. I said, wow, great perception. Love it. Yeah, he was the unicorn, meaning that when he died, it was such a loss. It wasn't just the flesh losing a person, that it was losing the spirit completely. It was a complete loss. It wasn't just a loss of like, well, he's not here anymore in the flesh. No, he's not here anymore in the spirit. The energy, that energy was gone, and it was such a loss that I didn't have the tool. I did not 40 years ago to handle it, to deal with it, to understand this loss, And so I left the band, because once that spirit was gone, it was never ever the same. And so when you say unicorn, I have not ever played again with that feeling, that energy, that spirit that I felt with Randy. And in some way, it's what keeps me going, carrying on, trying to feel that again, that energy, that spirit in my life musically,
I remember when we lost him. I was such a rock fan, and there was almost like a sense of hopelessness, among people that were in the rock community. We were loving Ozzy and Van Halen and UFO and Blue Oyster Cult, and those were all our bands growing up and everything. And to lose him, at such a young age, there was this hopelessness, that people felt. Both you and Ozzy have said that you would not have had the careers that you have without him coming into your life. So explain your piece of that.
Wow. Okay. I will do that. But when asked that question in the past, and having that request to actually go there, in the past, I have always needed, or the only way that I knew how to go there to that moment was by going back within me and looking at what happened from my own perception, my own eyes. And that's always been a very painful experience for me, So I've learned how to actually revisit the place and time, the event, as an observer now, which allows me to disconnect with the pain. Now I'm looking at myself experiencing this, and when you said the word hopelessness, and I've done interviews through the years, and you're the first person that actually brought the word that encompasses the experience, hopelessness, when this happened, because it it's multi-level. First, we were asleep. Ozzy, Sharon, Tommy, myself, we were asleep in the bus, in the bunks, with the doors closed, so we were not hearing anything. You know, if you've ever been in a tour bus, it's very acoustically sealed, so you can actually sleep in that area without any outside noise. And one of them was actually the plane flying. You know, and we were awakened by the plane clipping the bus. It hit the bus, and we were, you know, isolated. You know, I was in my bunk. Sharon Ozzy was in the back lounge sleeping. We had no idea where we were at. So I thought, well, we must have gotten in a some kind of a road accident on the way to the hotel, from where we were at. So when the door is open from where we were sleeping, when that where the bunks are, you go into the front lounge, you open the door, and everything's revealed. And you see glass shatter in the front lounge. The window on the passenger side is blown. And I see our tour manager pulling his hair out, crying, they're gone. And he's looking in a certain direction behind the bus, you know. And we have this is not, you know, it's like, this is not computing. This is like, what's going on, right? The bus driver's estranged wife, who had just joined him like a couple of days before, they have been separated, and he has been trying to repair their relationship. She's standing frozen on the doorway of the tour bus, so Sharon just kind of like shoves her to one side and bolts out, and we follow her, and I look to my right, and where Jake Duncan was facing, and there's a house on fire. The garage is on fire. Nothing's making sense. As soon as information is jagged, because nobody, you know, everybody is shell shocked that witnessed it, and we are like we don't know what's going on. Once we find out that Randy and Rachel and the bus driver that's the plane that crashed. That's hopelessness, and hopelessness has a sound. It's a very low frequency, and it's very ominous. It's like a low, very. I mean, my vocal cords cannot go that low. It's this ominous vibration, and I couldn't hear anything. My senses were into shock. All I heard was this inside my head, this low frequency, and that's hopelessness. I have never felt any deeper hopelessness than that in my whole life, and I hope that I never experience it ever again.
And as you describe this, you really were not after that allowed to grieve, because things, you know, had to continue, and there was a tour. And, you know, now looking back 40 years later, now there would be a time where you would go inside yourself, and but at that time it was like, well, listen, we've got to keep going, and we've got to figure out who's going to be part of the fray. And then, you know, there was talk of your brother coming into the band, and then Brad Gillis, and, you know, but it was sort of this we just have to kind of trudge on. You were in deep pain, Ozzy obviously in deep pain, you know, Sharon in deep pain, but still being able to move forward. She lost her, you know, best friend in Rachel Youngblood. And, you know, you look back on it now, and the PTSD that you must have experienced being there and not being able to grieve would probably be handled very differently in 2021. Don't you think?
Yeah, that's very astute of you, because we've never had this conversation before. So this is not information that you have gathered from talking with me. This is something that your perception, and it's very incredibly spot on. Would it have been handled differently? Maybe, maybe not. It all depends. It all depends where Ozzy right now, from what I understand from people that I know him, because we're not in direct contact. But then again, I'm not direct contact really with anybody that I play with. Well, I mean, we're still friends, but we're not like calling each other up and texting. So from my understanding, is Ozzy is sober. So somehow he will have enough clarity and sobriety to be able to grieve. The reason why we continued on, it was to basically keep him occupied, keep him moving, keeping it and this is something that it's clear to all of us that were in that circle at that time, that if Ozzy would have gone home and just had just nothing to do but think and just cry and drink and do drugs or whatever, he would have killed himself. Not from suicide, but just like trying to quelch that's the tragedy that was in his head. So so our goal was to keep him occupied, keep him moving, keep him busy, keep him from drinking himself to death. So that was the goal. So yes, that's where Ozzy was at that time. He wasn't sober. 40 years ago, he is now. So that might have been a whole different series of events post the crash.
Yeah. Because there were parts in the book where, Ozzy was hugging, Randy's mom, at the funeral services and saying to the rest of the members of the band, what do I say to Dolores? She left her son with us and now he's coming back, in a box. So that pain that he must have been feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So will you be at the induction in October? Will you be able to be there? What's going to happen that night? How will you feel? How great will that be for you?
Well, I'm definitely watching on TV. No, this is Randy's moment. This should just be, and the person to induct him, obviously there's only one choice. I mean, outside of Randy's family, it will be Ozzy. That's it, and I will be proudly watching from television, in my living room with my little dog on my lap.
Yeah, you and baby Willow will be watching
right.
This amazing, beautiful moment. And, it is so incredible because any anniversary, whether it's his birthday or the anniversary of his passing, I always have listeners that this day is marked for them. It's commemorated, whether they're older or whether they're younger. His memory has so lived on. And, the past year, you also lost a great friend in Frankie Banali. Gosh, we love Frankie. He was such a salt of the earth guy. There was nobody on the planet better than Frankie. Just a beautiful, beautiful person. And, somebody that you, I'm sure, knew very well when you were in Whitesnake, and that was Tawny Katane. So this has been a very tough year, and I think this honoring of Randy in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, something that, as you said, nobody thought this would happen. It has been really a bright spot because the Rock Hall has not always been kind, as we know, to hard rock and metal. And that's sort of a bone of contention with people. So I think when everybody saw this, everybody was like, yes, this is fantastic. This is,
it is,
Yeah.
Well, there seems to be a growth, a progression in consciousness around the world, from what we've been going through for the last year with the pandemic, and it's giving us a time to actually rethink our future. And there's no better way to acknowledge our future by the wonderful contributions from those who have I look. The way that I look at it is Randy Rhoads deserves to be on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame based solely on his musical contributions and not from grieving his loss. And Randy deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame today, even if he was alive.
Yeah.
And but then again, it's because his music is alive that he belongs in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, absolutely. An iconic figure that we lost at 25, and every day his presence is still felt
Yeah.
on rock radio, everywhere. I'm always happy to see your face. What does your summer look like, Mr. Rudy? Will you be out? Will you be touring? Will you be leaving Miss Willow at home? What's going to happen? Miss Willow, by the way, is not Rudy's wife. Rudy's wife is Rebecca, and you guys have been
Yeah.
married the greatest rock and roll marriages. Miss Willow is his dog, so we love Miss Willow. Rudy's such an animal lover. So you're going to be out on the road this summer, my friend?
Yeah, absolutely. I got my Speedos packed already.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to hit the road.
Yeah. Rudy, it is always awesome to see you. And I wanted to have this chat with you as soon as we got the great news about Randy. And I was like, I got to get Rudy. I got to get Rudy. So thank you so much for taking the time, my friend. Love you. Keep helping the animals in the shelters in California, because we certainly need you. And give Baby Willow a huge smoocho-rama from me and Rosie Carr.
Thank you, Terry. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. And thank you for this wonderful segment that you're doing about Randy Rhoads.
Yay. DHA's Reconnect with Rockers is powered by Karis Lock Company, your full-service locksmith, and Dover Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram on Route 46 in Rockaway. Online at doverdodge.com.